Hey, welcome back. This is another podcast by Miriam at Raise Your Vibes. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for listening, everybody. Today's podcast is about reflection and learning to look back in order to go forward, and sometimes looking back to learn about things that hopefully, we've picked up on, skills that we've hopefully learned along the way. Sometimes we don't. Sometimes we do. So let's look at this. Let's look at this particular topic. All of us will have lots of different scenarios that have happened in our lives, whether it's friendships, relationships, or sibling rivalry, or friendships that have ended or gone forward, or jobs that haven't gone the way we wanted them to go. Certain scenarios will pop into your head about how these scenarios happen. It could be, even an argument with a family member, with a sibling. It could be with a friend. There are times when you have to sit back and reflect upon those particular keystones and milestones and look at how you and the other person have reacted, or, not necessarily gone forward or gone backward with it. But what have you learnt from it? What have you reflected from it? What are the things that you've learnt about your own behaviour traits and your personality traits that perhaps you're proud of, or perhaps that still need working on? None of us are perfect. We don't expect to be perfect. But it doesn't hurt for us to look back and reflect and think about the certain qualities within our personalities, our id, our ego, our psyche, those particular aspects that we need to perhaps recalibrate. Sometimes perhaps we need to do more of standing up for ourselves. Perhaps there are times when we need to speak up more. Perhaps there are times when we need to stay quiet, for example. Perhaps there are times when we need to say to certain individuals, this particular scenario is not making me happy. I need to move forward, or I don't want you as part of my life, for example. There are times as well when we reflect and we think, actually, I shouldn't have said that particular phrase, or I shouldn't have said that particular sentence, or I shouldn't have used that particular tone of voice. But in this other scenario, in this other context, it's quite all right for me to do that. Reflection can be a really beautiful tool to look back and to learn. But sadly, there's quite a lot of us that don't use it that way, There are quite a lot of us that don't reflect, that don't sit back. And sometimes that requires quite a lot of detachment as well. When we give our hearts away, when we give our souls away, we give it quite freely. And some of us give it with attachment and detachment as well. We give it with this sense of responsibility that the other individual is going to look after it the same way that we do. When we sit back and we reflect, why did I act this particular way? Why did I say those particular words or phrases? Why did I give whole part of me freely? Why did I give so much of myself in fear? Why did I, and so on. These are like key questions that most of us have all the time. But the main thing is to try and look back and reflect on that and think about what the real scenario is. What is the real deal? How is it that you can move forward from that? You might be an amazing person. You might have some great attributes, but there are still things that you perhaps need to fine tune and work on. Relationships with our family members, with close loved ones, can be quite challenging, can be quite hard. There are times when you have to bite your lip. There are times when you're frustrated, and there are times when you are more in wisdom and more in tune than they are, and that's more about your spiritual journey and their spiritual journey as well. Just because somebody's older than you doesn't mean that they're necessarily wiser, and vice versa. Somebody can be younger than you and more wiser and more in tune. Sometimes we have individuals that aren't necessarily altogether there either. They don't take that ownership, they don't take that responsibility. You might be the adult, but you're not necessarily acting like the adult. There are a number of people that will escape the reality of the scenario that they're in. They don't want to accept that the fact that they're in this adult world that has responsibilities and actions and implications. They still want to be in childhood mode, not taking on ownership of the implications of their behaviour. They're still expecting other people to clean up after them, so to speak. Reflection is a good tool for stepping back. It's a good tool to look at where you've been, what you've learned, where you're going, where you're hoping to move forward to. It's not always an easy journey either. It's not easy to look at yourself in the mirror and own up to some of the things that you've done wrong, because we do make mistakes, we do things wrong. But the biggest lesson that all of us can face is owning up to that and taking ownership of that. There are a number of people that you will know that won't do that at all. They won't take that ownership, full stop. Instead, they will pass that burden on to somebody else. Or they won't even take ownership at all of any sense of pain or responsibility. They don't take ownership of anything that they've necessarily done wrong. It's always the other person's fault. There are some individuals out there that will be very, very troubled by that burdensome, by that pain, by that trauma, because sometimes that burdenship can be quite heavy. It can, overflow your cup, so to speak. And reflection is a good way of looking at the people around you in your inner circle, in your inner life. Maybe there are times when you have to take a step back from people to respect you and to respect your boundaries and to respect your faith and to respect your religion, to respect who you are as a spiritual being. There are times when you might not necessarily be able to cut that person out of your life, but you have to take a step back. You put boundaries in place. Reflection is a good way of doing that. Family members can be quite tricky in the sense that some of us feel like we can't necessarily divorce our parents, we can't necessarily detach, we can't move away. We can step back, we can put boundaries in, we can say no to them though, okay? And there are scenarios where some people have stepped away for their own sake, for their own mental health sake. I have discussed that in a prior podcast about dealing with toxic siblings, which is very similar to family members as well. But what do we do when it's friends, when it's loved ones that, don't want to reflect, don't want to move forward? You're almost in this tug of war sometimes, where one person is pulling on one particular aspect and one person is pulling in the other direction. And sometimes friendships can be mended and relationships can be mended if the two of you are willing to meet halfway. But if the person isn't willing to reflect like you are, and they aren't willing to reflect on the beauty of your friendship or relationship, then what's the point in staying there? Your reflection might make you realize that you don't need this, stress. You don't need this hardship. You don't need this headache. You need positivity. You need love. You need the reciprocation of the boundaries that both of you hopefully have put in place. And if the other person isn't taking ownership of that or isn't even respecting that, then it's time to move forward. That's hard, Reflection makes you do that. Reflection makes you look at the deep, dark shadows within ourselves, within our souls. A phrase I had used a long time before was the Clint Eastwood phrase, of the good, the bad, and the ugly. But now I've started using the phrase of the good, the bad, the ugly, and the beautiful. Because when you do reflect, if we're honest with ourselves, there is this beautiful part of us. There is a beautiful soul. There's this innocence about us. But not everybody sees that, and everybody has the wisdom to see that or accept it. We're so busy within our society putting each other down, being negative. We're constantly telling each other what we can and can't do, and we don't actually maintain our freedom, and we don't look at the fact that we are living our life to the fullest. There are times when some of us are within our own little space, our own little zone, our own little prisons, whatever that prison might be, mental, physical, spiritual, religious. We don't appreciate the reflection that's needed sometimes when we take a step back. If we're criticizing someone for the way they dress, the way they speak, the way they behave, is it really a reflection on them or is it a reflection on us? Interesting question, isn't it? We have to, start within. We have to reflect, we have to look back, and we have to sometimes be alone in our own meditation and in our own thoughts and sort of look at our behaviour, and we have to have a look at our behaviour patterns and see where this is actually really stemming from. Are we staying with that friendship? Are we staying in that sort of toxic, cycle because it's all we know, for example? Is it the fact that we are weak, insecure? Is it the fact that we are needy? Is it the fact that we feel unloved? These are things I've been dealing with for a while with other individuals as well as myself. We have to be honest. There are parts of us that have to be reflected upon. We have to look at the work person in the mirror. We have to look at ourselves, and we have to be really, really honest and think, am I moving forward with my life? Am I making the same patterns? Am I breaking them? Am I becoming a better person? None of this is going to happen overnight. None of this is going to happen magically when you click those fingers. But it's a matter of, pacing yourself and recognizing that you are understanding of your needs, and you are understanding of your own reflection, and you are understanding of the fact that you want to grow. You want to grow to be a better person. You don't necessarily want to stay stagnant. You don't necessarily want to stay in the same pitch that you were before. You want to keep moving forward. You want to live. You don't want to necessarily exist, and you don't necessarily want to exist by the conditions other people place upon you. So reflection can and does bring about change. It brings about ideals about yourself. It lets you look at the good, the bad, the ugly, and the beautiful, as I've said. And it allows you to really look at your deep inner wounds, but your strengths as well. It lets you look at aspects of yourself that you didn't necessarily recognize. Sometimes we think that, the world is quite cruel to us when we don't really realize the joys that it brings as well. And sometimes we're so obsessed and we're so focused on the negativity that we don't see negativity as actually being positivity. And we get ourselves confused, we get ourselves mixed up. So it's important to sit back and reflect and to be open about things. If we're in a place of pessimism, we're not going to necessarily see the joys that life brings, because we're in a downward spiral of negative thought and negative thought patterns. We don't allow ourselves to see how uplifting and how beautiful a different option might be that's come along in our life, because we're so busy focusing on the negativity instead. And this is where reflection is an amazing tool. It helps us to move forward. It helps us to see what's clearly right in front of us. There are times so many things are a blessing to us, and sometimes they're a blessing in disguise, but we're so engrossed, like I said, in that negative mindset, in negative thinking or negative thoughts by others, that we don't allow ourselves to see. So we have to make sure that when we reflect honestly. We reflect in a detached way. We reflect with honesty and integrity, and we reflect with complete detachment of our soul and of our being. And that's really hard to do, trust me. It's really hard to meditate and just take all those little aspects away and just sit and surrender and not let your clouds, not let your thoughts and negativity enter your mind. If anything, you just detach completely and you look at things in a completely different light, in a completely different zone, and you allow yourselves to see things clearly as they are. And it's only when you do that that you really start to reflect, okay? And it's only from that type of reflection, when you really detach, that you're able to sort of move forward and go ahead with the things that you need to perhaps change, or the things that you need to accept, okay? And when we do these types of scenarios with ourselves, this type of meditation, we can clearly see what's in front of us. We can clearly see and we can clearly accept the love and the kindness and the passion that's in our lives, with our friends, with our families. And we can detach, but also we can, accept this love and kindness and friendship that's been given to us. Some of it we take for granted too, and some of it we don't realize it's right there in front of us, and we need to take ownership of it, and we need to be thankful and we need to be grateful. A lot of positivity does come out from this. Of course it does, but it's a matter of being open and being understanding that it's there in the first place. And that's what reflection does. Reflection does allow us to see that. Reflection, if we're honest, allows us to really do a check-in of all the qualities and all the good things that are going on in our lives. It's not just about negativity, it's not just about toxicity, it's not just about pessimism. Reflection can be a very positive mind frame, you know, and it doesn't hurt to stand back, to switch off, to give yourself a little bit of you time, a little bit of focus time, to look at that in its whole being and its whole essence. Sometimes we have to switch off the noise, the traffic, the job, the work, the family, the pressures of life, to meditate properly, completely, in order to do that, you know. And it's about finding that serenity within ourselves in order to find that humbleness, you know, and to be at peace with that humbleness, to be at peace with who we really are, you know. There are going to be qualities about ourselves that we don't understand, we don't expect, we don't really appreciate, but that also comes back to the topic I've covered before about self-love, you know. If you've not really got genuine self-love for yourself, you're not going to do a real justice when you do reflection, because the reflection is not going to be balanced. The reflection is going to be only just a retrospective part of your id and your ego, you know. And until you are balanced and you are harmonious within, that reflection is not going to be doing you any good. And this is where honesty and integrity also comes in. So some of that also requires you to really look at yourself and really focus on what matters, you know. So you have to be honest as well. You have to be very honest. We have to look at yourself completely, like I said, with the good, the bad, the ugly, and what I'm calling now the beautiful. And it's only when you do that can you really make strives to go forward, strives for better change, for better acceptance of yourself, you know. Nobody's saying that you were a bad person. Nobody's saying that at all. We all strive to move forward. We all strive to change for the better. But it starts with us, and it starts with us reflecting honestly, with integrity, and it starts with us being real and honest about our feelings, whether it's about ourselves or whether it's about the people around us, and embracing the changes that we might need to make. So, take a step back, look at your particular scenario, see where you need to make some changes for the better. It might be there is just a small minor change you have to make. That's fine. But the fact is you're making it. Okay? Maybe play this podcast again. Maybe there's parts of it that you need to rehear. Sometimes we need to do that too. But wherever you are in your particular journey of reflection, take a step back, detach, reflect, look again, look within, look outside, look back in again. But do it in an honest way. I hope you're doing well. I hope you learn from that. I hope you reflect, and I hope it helps you strive forward. And we'll tune in again next time on a different topic on helping yourself to raise your vibe. Thank you for listening. This is Miriam Khan. Bye bye for now.